What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I'm making this video today. Gonna try and keep it quick, but I'm making it in response to a comment on one of my videos. It was my video about how the Dolphins traded Charles Harris to the Falcons. It was a comment though about Christian Wilkins because I had talked about his underwhelming productivity in his first year and that he didn't command a lot of double teams, etc., etc. And so Chris Foster had commented that Christian Wilkins was being double teamed a lot last year. Now real quick, before I get into my response, this evolved into how I would have done last year and this year's drafts differently. Now, we'll obviously never know. We'll have to wait and see how those players pan out and how the Dolphins' choices pan out. But it'll be a fun little thought exercise because the fact is like I said, I would have done last year and this year's draft differently. I think they mishandled it and mismanaged it, and both of them. And it's just a little thought exercise. And you guys can see for yourself which you would prefer. I know most fans are infatuated with Tua, so they probably are cool with how it is now, but it'll be fun to look at. But first, let's respond to his question or his comment, though. My response was not from what I could tell, and I know that Godshaw actually got double-teamed quite a bit. He did. Now, real quick, also, just to mention, I'm not an expert. I didn't play football. I played a lot of backyard football, but not for school or Pee-wee or anything like that. I was never a coach or anything like that. I don't know the X's and O's, but I did watch the games. I rewatched the games quite a bit to do my videos and so on and so forth. And, you know, with the stats coupled with that and the other data that I have, these are the conclusions that I draw from it. Also, let's see. I may be mistaken, but I believe that Godshaw did get more of the double teams. Like I said, could be wrong, but I do believe that is the case. Either way, though, Christian Wilkins was our first-round pick from 2019, and while it's fair to say it was his rookie season, etc., he was still part of one of the worst run games and overall defenses in the league. He had a lot of tackles, but that shows he stayed with the play and helped make tackles after they broke past the line of scrimmage more than it does his individual efficiency at the line, right? So it says to me that, and you know, the stats and the tape that I watched show this, is that oftentimes the ball carrier, the runner, or the receiver would get past the line of scrimmage, and then, you know, somewhere in the linebackers or the secondary, the ball carrier would get, you know, held up somewhere, and then Christian Wilkins would come in and help clean up the play and get assists or even sometimes solo tackles, and that's good, right? He should, and that shows some upside and possible room for improvement and a step forward. Right? It shows good hustle, etc., etc., but it doesn't show the kind of productivity and personal efficiency that we want to see out of him at the line of scrimmage, right? He was not particularly good in the run game and produced almost no pressure. I do hope that he develops and takes a step forward this year, but if not, then it makes me question even more why they took him after there was a run on defensive linemen in round 1 last year, of course, in 2019, when they could have taken a top talent on the offensive line. In fact, they could have gotten their center of the future in Garrett Bradbury, and then 2 of the top tackles from this draft, and they would have a scary line coming together. So, to be clear, just a couple of my quick philosophies. You know, I would never take a quarterback in rounds 1 or 2 ever, but every year in 3 or later. I don't like to chase players. I would trade back, you know, if anything, and not trade up or just stay put. Also, just some other quick side notes. You know, I don't think the whole tear down, tank, rebuild was necessary to begin with, but I am going to, for the sake of this argument, be assuming that it was, and that clearing the roster and getting rid of Tannehill, etc., was necessary. Like, I wouldn't have traded Tannehill, you guys know that, but we're going to assume all that. But either way, so assuming all of that, they could have gotten Garrett Bradbury, their center of the future last year, right? Because I would have done that different. They chose Christian Wilkins in round 1, no round 2 pick because they traded for Josh Rosen, and then they got Michael Dieter in round 3. they could have, that I would have done it differently and got Garrett Bradbury in round 1. And then this year, instead of taking Tua at 5, they could have gotten either Tristan Wirfs, Mekhi Becton, or Jedrick Wills, who were available at 5, or at 18, they could have still, taken Austin Jackson if they really liked him. I personally would have taken Josh Jones over Austin Jackson, who was available at 5 or at 18, but Isaiah Wilson was also there, so they had options. But that line, if they would have taken Garrett Bradbury, Tristan Wirfs, and Josh Jones, to me, that line would be fucking nasty going forward. Okay, now I do address the quarterback position, so hold on. Don't get, all crazy here because I decided to take 3 first-round offensive linemen, over the past 2 drafts. But that line would be fucking coming together and be pretty fucking scary. Okay, but continuing on. Then I would have also coupled that from this year with a top safety. Personally, I would have taken Xavier McKinney, who would have been available at pick number 30 instead of Noah Igbinoghene, who is a cornerback. And cornerback is certainly one of the deeper areas on your defense, especially considering you have 2 out of the top 3 highest paid corners in the league, Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. And Noah Igbinoghene seems to be a carbon copy of Byron Jones, who, doesn't seem to be very good at creating turnovers, but is solid in man-to-man coverage. Okay, they could have gotten Xavier McKinney, who I would have taken 30th overall instead of Noah Igbinoghene, but Grant Delpit, Kyle Duggar, Ashton Davis, and Antoine Winfield Jr. were all available at 30th overall. I also would have taken one of the top running back talents from this year's draft. Personally, I would have taken J.K. Dobbins. Clyde Edwards-Helaire went before we could have picked, so he wouldn't have been available, but I would have taken J.K. Dobbins, who was available at 39th overall in round 2, but Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers, and A.J. Dillon were also all available at 39th overall. So last year, instead of trading for Josh Rosen, I would have taken a defensive lineman in round 2, and then I would have also taken a defensive lineman at 59th overall in this year's round 2. Right? I also would have taken, like I said before, Will Grier in round 3 of last year's draft to bring up behind Ryan Fitzpatrick and not trade for Rosen, as I mentioned before, and also assuming that, getting rid of Tannehill and clearing the roster was necessary. Then I would have taken either Jacob Eason or Jake Fromm from this year's draft, who both fell to round 4 and 5 respectively. Okay, Jacob Eason fell to round 4, 122 overall, and Jake Fromm 167th overall. Now look, those things would fit perfectly with my scenario. Last year I would have taken a round 3 quarterback. This year I would have taken either a round 4 or a round 5 quarterback. So 1 quarterback every year in round 3 or later. And then that would have been behind your veteran, Ryan Fitzpatrick, who would be playing behind an offensive line of Tristan Wirfs, I would say probably Tristan Wirfs at left tackle, Josh Jones at right tackle, and then Garrett Bradbury at center. Okay, and then you'd have Xavier, the way I do it, Xavier McKinney, the top safety as well, to help round out that secondary with Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. And then, again, a day 2 defensive lineman, most likely pass rusher, because I probably would take 1 defensive tackle and 1 pass rusher just to kind of round out that defensive line. And then, one of the top running backs in my scenario, J.K. Dobbins. That offensive line, that running back room, the quarterback room, all of that gets drastically improved, and you don't have to chase anybody. You don't have to take, guys that have intense medical histories, whatever. Anyway, and then, as I go on to say, I believe they could have managed both last year and this year's drafts a lot better and could have gotten much better overall talent while also getting the best talent at the positions of most need. The Dolphins are not in a position to simply take best player available. They need to be smart about how they build a well-rounded team. I don't personally believe they are doing that, but they have an opportunity to prove me wrong. To be fair, I do see a ton of exciting boom potential, as I've mentioned, but I also see a ton of scary bust potential. Phins up and hashtag prove it. Okay, so just really fast to wrap this up, like I said, here's what they did, right? Last year, they took Christian Wilkins in round 1. Then they took essentially Josh Rosen with their 2nd round pick, and then Michael Dieter with their 3rd round pick. Okay, an offensive lineman. Then in this year's draft, I'm just focusing obviously on the first few rounds, right, and their top picks. This year they took Tua with 5th overall, Austin Jackson with 18th overall, Noah Igbinoghene 30th overall, and then they took Robert Hunt with the 39th overall pick, and then who did they take with the 59th overall pick? It was or the 56th overall pick, excuse me, defensive tackle Raekwon Davis. Okay, that's what they did, right? So instead of doing that, I would have taken Garrett Bradbury in round 1 last year, a defensive lineman, either a tackle or a defensive end in round 2 last year instead of trading for Rosen. I would have taken, instead of Michael Dieter in round 3 last year, I would have taken quarterback Will Grier to bring up behind Ryan Fitzpatrick last year. Then from this year, instead of taking Tua, I would have taken Tristan Wirfs. Instead of taking Austin Jackson, I would have taken Josh Jones. Instead of taking Noah Igbinoghene, I would have taken Xavier McKinney. And then instead of taking Robert Hunt, I would have taken J.K. Dobbins. And then instead of Raekwon Davis is a defensive lineman. So like I said, I would have taken a defensive lineman in that position anyway. So if they really liked Raekwon Davis, then fine, fair, leave him at that pick. And honestly, to be honest with you, our 2nd round pick last year most likely would have been a defensive end, because I would have felt that would have been the more pressing need at the time. Anyway, so it would be fitting that we take a defensive tackle this year in my philosophy. So the Raekwon Davis pick, whatever, is fine. But so that's how I would have done things a bit differently. We'll have to, like I said, at the end of the day, we'll have to, we'll monitor and see how all those players do and how their careers go. And then we'll see how, the Dolphins do and if their picks pan out and if it works for them. I hope it does. I really, really, really do. I can't stress that enough, man. I want my team to be great. I personally don't see it adding up. I personally would have done things differently, but to be fair, it can, right? It can add up. There is potential for that. There is a ton of exciting boom potential, but there's also a lot of bust potential. And so, if they do end up busting and it doesn't turn out, then you'll be able to say that Noah Igbinoghene and Austin Jackson were reaches, and some of these guys that they took were reaches, that the long snapper they took was a reach. They could have gotten him in as an undrafted guy, right? Whatever. And that they probably should have done differently. But if it's a boom and if this is all successful, then we can just all move on and be happy because our team is great. So we'll see how it pans out. I do hope for the latter, but unfortunately, from my perspective and the data and information that I have, I predict that it's going to be more of the former. The Dolphins are going to end up not having as successful a season as we hope. These picks are not going to pan out how they see it, nor are the overpriced, from my perspective, veteran free agents that they signed. And then in a couple years, Brian Flores and this regime are going to get scapegoated for Stephen Ross's overall ineptitude and inability to make proper football decisions. Because look, as much as I disagree with Chris Grier and Brian Flores and their stances and takes and philosophies, it's all at the behest and order of Stephen Ross. So as you guys know, I think he is the root cause and the root problem for why we've been stuck in perpetual mediocrity and why we are trending, in my view, in the wrong direction. And certainly if you look at the records over his tenure, it would certainly suggest that, including last year. He took over the franchise when we still had a pretty strong winning history and tradition, and then it's just been all downhill since. You know, but look, man, like I said, hashtag prove it, get it done. They need to. Otherwise, it's going to turn out not good. And then in a few years, we're going to end up hitting the reset button, and it's going to be the same thing over and over again. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. With that, though, I'm going to get out of here. I hope you guys enjoy my videos and perspective. I hope you do. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And, of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.